Hi again folks, how's all doing? So you may have seen the short video I did on this Bachmann Pannier tank recently. This was sent to me by William and it turned out it had a burnt out motor. Unfortunately, replacements aren't available, so I fitted one of these wee motors, but the original worm gear didn't fit. So I fitted this worm gear, which just meshes with the intermediate gear and no more. But I wasn't entirely happy with that. Now, quite a few people made various suggestions on how to make this worm gear fit this motor. Um, but really, the answer ideally was some sort of adapter or some brass tubing. One thing I did not want to consider doing was drilling out the worm, as that would require a really good lathe or drill stand. You would need to be extremely accurate with the drill to ensure the hole was bang on centre. Otherwise, you could have all sorts of trouble. And I also didn't want to be soldering anything. The simplest solution to me was a single piece of brass tubing that has the correct inner and outer diameters for the job. So the shaft on the armature for this motor is 1.4 millimeters, according to these calipers. And the shaft on the old motor, this is the burnt out motor here, is 1.7. Now I managed to get hold of some brass tubing that has an outer diameter of 1.7 millimeters and an inner diameter of 1.5. I think that's as close as I'll get to the right fit. It fits onto this motor quite nicely. Obviously it'll need epoxied. It's not going to grip. I mean, I could pinch the tubing actually, but yeah, I think I would rather epoxy it. And it also fits nicely into the worm gear as well. It'll need to be epoxied as well. So we'll need to epoxy a piece of tubing into there and then epoxy that onto the motor. And I think that'll work. So we'll need to get this motor out of here, which means I need to take the underframe out. It comes out. This might mean that the holes that I drilled might be out of alignment now. I might need to drill new ones. But let's get this motor out. Actually, no, I don't need to get the motor out. What am I talking about? Let's just get the worm gear off. Now we'll need to cut a length of this tubing. See if it goes through. Need about that much. I'm just going to cut this roughly just now. And that'll fit in there. So I'm going to want to epoxy this little bit of brass tube into the worm. But I think I'd quite like to try and do a test fit just to make sure it's going to, the motor's going to fit with this worm against the intermediate gear. So I'm just going to snip the end of that off. And I'll buff that down. That's going to hold that in place. So I can fit that on just temporarily. Now, and we can see there that we've got a really nice mesh between the gears. So I want it set about there. If it's hard in, it'll probably be okay, but yeah, I would say we want it set about there. Right, okay. We'll get some metal epoxy mixed up. I like metal epoxy better than ordinary epoxy. It doesn't smell as bad, and it sets, I think, harder and a bit more like a really hard plastic. That's ordinary epoxy there. it always seems a little bit soft to me, whereas metal epoxy is really, really hard. And it'll stick to anything. It's not just for use with metal. Right, mix that up. Now we're not going to need much. We'll put a little bit on there. And then we'll shove that through there. So that brass tube is now epoxied into there, so the shaft will go in that end. That end will smooth off. We'll cut away that snipped piece of brass tubing. So another wee dab of epoxy on the shaft of the motor. And then we put that on, like so. I think I've still got room to put the screws in. I was a wee bit concerned about that. But yeah, I think that'll do it. Just a wee bit more. Alright, that looks pretty good to me. So I'm going to leave that epoxy time to set, and we'll get the motor screwed back in, and hopefully that'll be this back with its original worm gear, and it should run better. Okay, so next day the epoxy set nicely, so I've reassembled this. I discovered that I couldn't fit the screws into the mount and into the motor again. I did that before because I had to angle the motor very slightly to get that worm gear to engage with the intermediate gear. But with this worm gear, if I angled the motor a little bit, it would be far too hard up against the intermediate gear. It's nice just sat there straight and get a nice mesh. So what I've done is put some black tack in to secure the motor the way Hornby used to, and it'll be fine. I actually found that without that, even with the motor sitting quite loose, it was okay. It would still run the thing fine. So the black tack stops the motor rattling about, and that's all that really matters. So there we go, the original worm installed, nicely meshing with the intermediate gear there, and the motor's secure enough with the black tack. So there we go, that's Williams' 57xx Pannier tank reunited with its original worm gear. The wheels in this thing are in a bit of a sorry state. Maybe just let you see. I don't know what's happened to them. It's like they've been filed or something in the past. I did have a look online to see if a replacement wheel set was available, but no. I don't think Bachmann do any spares for this particular model. But I think it'll be okay. I've given the wheels a good polish, and I filed the flanges just to smooth them off a bit, because the way it was, I think it would have trouble going around corners, and it may still do a little bit. Also, the drive axle here was quite stiff, so I filed out the slot in the chassis a bit, and that seems a bit looser. You want to make sure that wheels move from side to side nice and freely. But I've got a funny feeling this will have a bit of a problem with some corners. Put couplings back on, and there we go. Good to go. Let's go and get a run round the layout. Okay, let's bring it out. So there we are, that's Williams' Pannier tank running again with its original worm fitted and a different motor to replace the old burnt out one. Yeah, this could really do with a new set of wheels, this model. There is a slight issue with it slowing down on curves, and I've looked into all the possible causes of that, from wheel spacing, rough flanges, restricted lateral movement. Some filing off the drive axle grooves in the chassis certainly helped, but a nice new set of smooth, clean wheels, rods and axles would make all the difference to this model, I think. But unfortunately, none are available. But it's better than being sat there as a non-runner, so I'm sure William will be happy to get this back running regardless. A lot of people have been asking about a layout update. All good things to those who wait. Coming soon, I promise. Okay folks, catch you later.